Thank you, Carol, and thanks to the panel members for that discussion. We have one last session this afternoon before we conclude this, and it's sort of session 3A. And I would like to invite Robert Maybery to come up to the podium. Just by way of introduction, Rob Maybery is a person that I've known for about 15 years. And Rob is a South African by background. Interestingly, we met in New Zealand. He's worked in Australia. He's been an advisor to many of the largest companies in Europe and the UK, and many Fortune 500 companies in the United States. Rob advises companies on things like the linkage between strategy, culture, organization, and individual performance, and the assessment of performance and potential for senior executives in these companies. So will you please join me in welcoming Rob Maybery?
I realize as the last speaker, my thank yous might be interpreted as a bromide, but I would sincerely like to thank the co-chairs and the sponsors for making a platform and a forum like this possible. And as we close today, and esteemed guests, I'd like to challenge us to really, when we leave here tonight, to bring into focus the many wonderful insights that you have been able to have privilege to listen to over today. In terms of my presentation to you, I'd like to really focus on reality and bring the global economic crisis into perspective in terms of a public statement I make, and I make it fairly regularly, is that we live in a world of a leadership crisis. We live in a leaderless world. So the global economic crisis isn't an aberration. And I will preface my averment with the following. If the manipulation of regulatory mechanisms continue in concert with miscreant behavior, manifest by the misrepresentation of company performance, it is akin to elite athletes who consciously procure and use performance-enhancing drugs to outperform the competition. This morally degenerate behavior is no different to the many deceitful chief executive officers, boards of directors, who premeditatedly misrepresent the financial results to outperform the market. Both are cheats. So the economic crisis that continues to pervade and is due to deteriorate, as I said earlier, is no aberration. And for us as leaders who are charged with changing society, we need to be more conscious of the emblematic consequences. We have never before had such an impressive dashboard in terms of data and information that we have at our disposal, more so than the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So when we talk about the emblematic consequences of this crisis, we need to think of the increasing levels of unemployment. Think when I say that to every day you open up international print media, Company X is downsizing by 25,000, 10,000, 5,000. And you link that back to Dr. Derek Foote's presentation at lunch. And you ask yourself as leaders in this room, how are we going to address the rise and rise of unemployment? It's not going to simply disappear. The abject poverty, the rise in levels of illiteracy, the incubation of civil war. And what I want to really bring to focus today is, why is it that we do not learn from history? So social fragmentation is another consequence of our global economic crisis. By that, what do I mean? We still have prevailing political and social injustice. How does that manifest? We have mass and violent demonstrations. All of us in this room realize what one YouTube film or documentary did across the globe within 72, 24 hours. We have pathological lunatics wielding guns and killing innocent people. We have drug and child trafficking now exceeding certain countries' GDP. And yet the masses remain mute. The future generation, we heard interesting insights about them. but we're leaving them with a world with no hope. We're kind of saying to them, find a job, securitize your finance, purchase a home, purchase a car, and by the way, you're on your own. Is that our legacy? And the question that we need to ask ourselves, do we really as a society understand the root cause and causes of this global economic crisis? Lo and behold, another summit, more discourse, a paucity of panacea. And so in this forum, it would be my personal desire and hope that as an esteemed group of people, we talk, but we also fashion a course of action. As I said, it's not an aberration. It has arrived at our doorstep because of us. We've created this mess. And at the moment, the brains trust that has been asked to find a solution has been spectacularly underwhelming. The solutions that we believe we may have proffered and put into place may not be solutions at all. And as business leaders, we can't live in a vacuum. We cannot remain unconscious. So the inextricable link between the economic crisis and the leadership crisis, let's spend some time on that. And I said to you, we don't appear to learn from history. So the preamble is thus: if we go back to the turn of the century, shortly after we had our celebratory 21st birthday, we had the dot-com bubble, 2001. 2002 ushered in Enron, WorldCom, Adelphia, Tyco, Parmalat, to mention but a few. Now, as I speak with you and share this podium with you, we need to reflect. That was 2002. In the short space of under 6 years, we ushered in the greatest handmade economic recession, perhaps a double-dip recession, in the history of this planet. And so began Bear Stearns, Lehman, et al. And so I ask again, do we learn from history? And we all know very well, and we are informed, that the architects of this current crisis have not faced conviction, but a few. Now, I was asked recently in Chicago on last Monday, is the leadership crisis due to the fact that we have a void, we have a dearth of talent? And my retort, it was rather pithy, was no. There are wonderful men and women in this world who are quite capable of leading. We simply do not know how to select the best leaders for the right roles. Some in the audience might not like that averment, but it's a truth. So if we look back 12 months, as I telegraphed up to 2008, if we simply reflect back on the last year, in and amidst this economic crisis, which is intractable and we're in a stasis, think about HSBC, money laundering, Standard & Chartered, money laundering. I'm glad Steve raised it. McKinsey's former esteemed leader, insider trading, together with another colleague. MF Global, John Corzine, bankruptcy. Peregrine Financial Management Group, bankruptcy. Yahoo, CV irregularity. Best Buy, social mischief and governance mischief. Maruti Suzuki, a general manager murdered and 90 injured in a plant attack in India. South Africa, Lonmin, 34 massacred in a strike action. I could bore you for another 30 minutes on the litany of dysfunctional behavior by leaders, by CEOs, by boards of directors, by government in the last 12 months. And you ask me, are we learning? Are we taking stock? Are we going to actually have a circuit-breaking mechanism that will arrest the rot and restore the society and our planet back to a status quo? And that is our responsibility. It's nobody else's. And we now know it's not ephemeral. And one of the major diagnostic reasons for this continuance of leadership crises is that we continue to be seduced by impression management. And I will show the link between the fact that the leadership crises that we experience can be directly related to boards of directors, and business schools. So I'll draw a triangle for you. And we really do need to prosecute the efficacy and the capability of boards and business education and business schools and their roles. For as long as postmodern business society maintains a view that intelligence quotient is a predictor of superior human performance, we will remain in trouble. Superior IQ and superior performance and moral fortitude do not go hand in hand. We need to focus more on what it takes to be a leader. The question was posed earlier today, what is a leader? We need to deconstruct the myth. We need to understand what is required of particular roles of CEOs in the sectors and the industries in which they perform. And it is the responsibility of the board. For the fact that we continue to be seduced by IQ and performance, CEOs and leaders of corporations, public and private, will continue to abuse positional power at the expense of personal power. And on the panel we heard the term self-mastery raised. It's become almost retail in its popularity. It's a given. And because we aren't selecting the right people for the right roles, and because development of leaders is misdirected, we continue to purvey with the rot. The question that we need to raise, and was raised again by the panel, if I turn to corporate governance, and I'm something of a heretic, and the question is to be asked, is quo vadis? Where are we going? So from Cadbury, Greenbury, to Sarbanes-Oxley, to the King 1 and 2, if you have an overview and do business in South Africa, what has it done for us? Where's it taken us? And Dawn was raising the question, it's becoming more and more demanding. And the reason is because we've destroyed trust. And the problem for us in society and in business, if we rely on regulators to form and promulgate law as to provide a framework for how to behave ethically, then society is indeed poorer. So on the one hand, we've been the authors of our own misfortune with this legacy of brain-numbing governance, which misdirects boards' attentions. But there's a wider problem than that. It's an excuse. Are we selecting the right directors? In my observations over many, many years in many different countries, too many boards are incompetent. There are some boards who have no clue in which direction the organization needs to proceed. It was raised on the panel too that management, if it's efficient, maybe the board's efficient. Well, if both are incompetent, you have a problem. Fundamentally, we need to change the model. It's broken and it does not work. It's been proved over and over again. Boards who are not competent, who are not properly constituted, who don't know what their role is, destroy value. You don't have to look too far down the road. You have a number of examples in Calgary, in the energy sector. And as you've learned in Canada in the last 12 months, the landscape in terms of board behavior, board performance will never be the same. It has changed and it is changing. And what we do need to change is the very essence is the role of the chairperson is as important as the role of the chief executive officer. And for those who are responsible in searching and selecting, it's time to deliver. We need to ask questions. We need to probe, what is the right size of the board? What about the issue of tenure? I'm not too concerned that the legacy of CEOs is 5 or 6 years. I'm not concerned about that at all. I think we've been preoccupied with 10, 12 years. The question we should be asking is, does the CEO and his or her leadership team deliver? And do they execute in a mature manner? We need to ask the question, what is the right mix of the board? How should boards be behaving and managing their relationship with management? And I've heard this time and time again by very conservative and cautious boards. We don't want to meddle with management. There's a fine line. I have a view that if management are not being transparent, if management are showing signs of incompetence, and capable and competent boards should be able to very quickly discern whether a line of business leader is competent or not. That's their job. And if there is evidence of incompetence, then you should step in. The role of a board director is not servile. And part of that problem is why we have a preponderance of servile directors globally is because we fish from the wrong ocean. We tend to select from a very antiquated and very insulated network. We need to question why we continue to select a range around gender and age. So in essence, as I want to draw this to a close, we have to turn it on its head. My view on business schools, and they play a very important role, so I would like to establish that fact, but they proffer much. They're abound. And the question and the vexed one is, do they produce leaders with a backbone or do they produce leaders with a wishbone? And their hands are unclean. Because as I was in this documentary last week, as I was previously referencing, I was with a professor from one of the business schools, and the journalist asked him, and he said, rogue organizations, rogue CEOs, and most of them come out of business schools. What say you, sir? And one of the key issues we need to really confront if we're going to arrest the global economic crisis, and it came through the leadership panel too, is business schools are not there to teach ethics nor to develop a conscience. They have historically been far too reliant and focused myopically on functional development of leaders. And so it's interesting at Harvard, they are wanting to lead the way by bringing in a suffusion of theory with practical application in the business world. And you will notice that many of them now are trying to become more behaviorally adroit. And in closing, I will leave you with this, that if we wish to change the leadership crisis, we need to understand the incredible direction we gain if we try to understand the construct of a person's personality and their suitability to lead. Because the direct link to the increase in the rise and rise of deviant pathology and value destruction and dysfunctional behavior is overwhelming. And in closing, if you would like to develop a potent business weapon which creates a compelling and sustained competitive advantage, it's no longer speed, but rather the alchemy of mental alacrity and true soul. Sadly, few possess it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Rob. Well, sometimes at the end of a long day, we're all falling asleep a little bit. And Rob, I think you woke us all up with your comments on leadership and boards and corporate organizations worldwide today. So thanks for that. I'd just like to, as we break, tell you what the plan is for the evening. The evening festivities begin at 6:30 in the Cascade Ballroom over in the main hotel. I think it's up on Mezzanine 1 or Mezzanine 2 or one of those, but you'll see on the signs it's a hard hotel to figure out sometimes. Anyway, it's the Cascade Ballroom, and there's a little reception room on the side of it, and that's where we'll have the cocktails, and dinner will follow after that. This evening's event will run from about 6:30 till about 9 p.m. We have some interesting and entertaining speakers and presenters for you this evening, so with that, I'll call this session to a close. Thank you all for participating today, and see you at the dinner.